Ian Seward from the SFIA Foundation. Um, his life is SFIA. It's all he does, but he's very good at it. He's also the person to talk to about what's happening with SFIA 9. So, Ian, I'd like to hand over to you at this point, and um, we will be taking questions. So, if you'd like to put any questions in the chat, and we will come to those at the end, uh, and run a bit of a Q&A once you finish speaking. So, Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Yes, so for those who don't know me or haven't heard of me, my name's Ian Seward, and I'm the General Manager of the SFIA Foundation. And when Kevin asked me to speak at this event, it was really a question of, so what's SFIA 9? I'll come on to that in a moment, because we don't know yet until we've built it. But I thought what I'd cover is what we've done since I last spoke here, what we are doing at the moment, and what's next, which effectively is SFIA 9. For those of you that don't know, SFIA's been around for 23 years. I think it started probably before that, before it was called SFIA. So we have a fairly long-term history. I'll do a very brief intro to the history of SFIA and how things have changed. A little bit about the framework itself, just in case there's anyone that doesn't know. And I've got a very small number of slides about SFIA 9, but I will spend most of the time talking about those. SFIA has changed in the last 7 years. The SFIA Foundation has changed in the last 7 years. I think it's fairly true to say that for the first few years, the first 15 years, first 5 or 6 releases, it was, broadly speaking, there's the framework. You can use it if you want to. And there was no promotion. There still is no promotion. And essentially, it was built very much a little bit behind closed doors. For the last 2 releases, and certainly for SFIA 9, the intention is to make everything very open. So we are an open and independent global not-for-profit foundation. It is no longer just the UK, and even the board now has international representation. So there is no part of the SFIA Foundation that is solely driven by the UK. We have the governance board, as I say, BCS is a member. We are very lean in terms of our operations. There are 3 people part-time, but we have hundreds of volunteers, fortunately. We have a design authority group now, where we have representatives from 7 countries, and they look after the framework in terms of making sure that it maintains its integrity, etc. We have SFIA Council, which are active users coming from roughly 20 countries. And this is a bit of a talking shop, but it's a useful talking shop. It's a source of ideas. It's a source of volunteers. But there is a much, much bigger global community, which is fully engaged now from over 180 countries that contribute in some way to SFIA, be they individuals, SMEs, large, multiple multinationals, and private and public sector. Again, way beyond the shores of the UK. I will say it here quickly. We do operate a licensing model because we do need money. We need money to operate. We have no central funding. We charge a very modest fee for all and any commercial use. We expect large corporates to pay a modest license fee, but individuals, SMEs, those using it for non-commercial purposes can use it free of charge. The graphic on the right-hand side is our new imperatives. So I'll come on to why we exist, but someone decided we should have some objectives. We've played around with these for years, but these are the most recent ones. There is a desire, the purpose of the SFIA Foundation is to enable greater capability and capacity within the global digital workforce. Number 1 is we maintain the framework. That's a given, we do that. That's business as usual, if you like. Number 2, we have an interest in increasing visibility and adoption of SFIA. We simply do not know our full user base. The new one is number 3, really. this is the best way of saying what was said at a board meeting. The representative from Australia said what he really wants is for the SFIA Foundation to make SFIA easier to consume. And so we paraphrase that into objective or imperative number 3. And that has been a bit of a driver for what we've done recently and will be going forward. And that has changed the dynamics slightly, which I'll come on to. And number 4, the one that worries me every now and again, is to ensure sufficient funding to be sustainable effectively. So we've always known why we exist. We exist to do what's on the left-hand side, and that is to enable the management of human capital, for whatever way you want to phrase it, whether that be skills development, planning and organizing the skills within your organization, assessing. Those things are what organizations do. And in order to do that, they need a framework. And SFIA fills that very well, because SFIA is a global common language that integrates those processes. What's on the right-hand side is effectively the SFIA framework, where we bring together professional skills, behaviors, knowledge, all under a model of experience, and we recognize qualifications and certifications. So that's why we exist. Timeline. Once upon a time, it was a UK initiative. It was published in English. People picked it up if they could speak English, and we found out that it was being used in places like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, and various other countries. It was then translated into a couple of other languages. Spanish, I think, was first, and then German. And effectively what's happened is people have just picked up SFIA and used it. Around version 6 release, things changed. It became very much more a global community, not just global input, but a global community, predominantly driven out of Australia initially. It is open to interpretation at the moment as to where the biggest SFIA user base is, whether it's still the UK or whether it's Australia now. Australia has really taken SFIA to its heart. From version 7 onwards, we adopted a slightly different approach. Before version 7, it was raise a change request. Now we actively talk to the community. You can still raise change requests. We actively seek people's opinions. We follow some industry themes, and we've done a whole host of things that are not directly associated with or part of the framework, but are directly relevant to people who use the framework. And those include things like guidance, collaborations, views of SFIA for different environments. We even published some sample role profiles. We resisted it for about 20 years, but we have been doing that recently. We linked bodies of knowledge, and essentially we've tried to take SFIA more from a this is a good thing to do, this is how you do it, but we're not going to tell you in detail, to one of what do you as the user base want. The result of this is we have a hugely increasing global user base. I think it's we're about 35% up on users around the world that we know of, and we simply do not know the full user base. So the framework, very quickly, this won't be a surprise to most of you, but there are 1 or 2 things in here that I think have become more relevant. One of the areas of SFIA that is poorly understood is the levels. In fact, the most important part, the levels. The levels are levels of responsibility. Most people don't quite either get that, or they understand it but choose to believe something else. SFIA levels are levels of responsibility, and that is deliberate because it's what industry likes. What we found over the last few years is that many other sectors, not traditional IT, have been either inspired by SFIA to build their own framework like SFIA, or actually just to use SFIA. And so it's become apparent that the levels of responsibility are pretty much universally applicable within industry, and as are many other skills. I mentioned we bring together levels of responsibility, generic attributes. Behavioral factors is a new term. I'll mention that in a moment. And professional skills, all supported by knowledge. Why don't we define knowledge? Because it changes so rapidly. We update every 3 years. So if I go back to this one, we update every 3 years, and we have reliably done that. So my first comment about version 9 is it will be published in 2024. We've done that for 8 releases so far. We will have the 9th release still on this 3-year cycle. SFIA is very much a model of experience. It's not a question of what you can do, it's what you have experience of doing. And that is what's liked by industry. And I don't think it's any surprise to anyone here that there is a need to localize it. We talk about programming, we don't talk about any particular language. If you want someone who's going to program in Java, you have to specify the language you want is Java. But in essence, SFIA is this framework. It hasn't changed in 23 years. It is still true to its original concepts. We have been playing some serious sort of statements about the levels of responsibility because these are poorly understood. So particularly with the release of SFIA 8, we've tried to make this very much more obvious that the levels are levels of responsibility. That means things like autonomy, influence, and complexity are increasing in terms of the impact people have within organizations. We've always had business skills as a bit of a catch-all in our generic attributes for those things that contribute to autonomy, influence, and complexity, but are not directly any one of those. And for SFIA 8, we were asked to identify where the behavioral factors were, and we produced a behavioral factors glossary, which said where you can find decision-making, where you can find team working, where you can find communication within the generic attributes. That document is downloaded about 300 times a month since it was produced. I'll come on to what that means for SFIA 9 in a moment. And we've explicitly talked about knowledge. Knowledge was always in SFIA as an implicit. You can't perform a skill without knowledge. But we have tried to bring out the recognition that knowledge is important and how that fits into the model more explicitly. This is the bit that most people recognize as SFIA. It's the front side of what we call the A3 chart. That's so that it can be printed so you can read it. We're now calling it the summary chart because that's a more accurate name. As of today, or as of 2019, sorry, not 2019, 2021, SFIA 8 is the most recent release. There are 121 professional skills, and they are listed here. We also have, from SFIA 7 onwards, we've presented what we're calling views of SFIA. So there is a view of SFIA for digital transformation, a view of SFIA for cybersecurity, a view of SFIA for data science and big data, a view of SFIA for DevOps, a view of SFIA for software engineering. Essentially what we do in those views is we organize the skills differently and we provide guidance for using it within those environments. And those have proved to be very popular, particularly the cybersecurity one. Laboring the point on the levels of responsibility, this is what they look like. It's typically the reverse of this document. We're looking at better ways of presenting this. And this is my one slide summary of SFIA. So we believe it's a straightforward 7-level framework, but it brings together professional skills, behaviors, and knowledge to reflect experience within the professional real-world environment. We make this point. It isn't about academia. It isn't about the education sector itself. It's about what professional organizations expect of their employees. 7 distinct and progressive levels of responsibility. That hasn't changed. It hasn't gone down to 6. It hasn't gone up to 8. There are still 7. there is no indication in SFIA 9 that that will change. The levels of responsibility are characterized by the generic attributes which contain the behavioral factors. We believe that, and we're actually looking at doing it, we haven't worked out exactly how to present it yet, but we are looking at how we can present those behavioral factors better and bring them out explicitly for SFIA 9. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Currently, there's 121 professional skills. The limitation on the number of skills has always been the size of paper we can print it on. So if it doesn't fit on an A3 sheet of paper, we can't add more skills. That's slightly tongue-in-cheek. It has gone up release on release, because more and more organizations from different sectors want to include things in SFIA. So SFIA, for a long time, has not just been an ICT model. It is an appropriate framework for business, digital business in general. We currently link to 57 bodies of knowledge. I cannot envisage a day when we will define items of knowledge that are required for individual skills. We will always link to bodies of knowledge because A, that's where the expertise is. And I'm not entirely sure the bodies of knowledge folks realize this, but the bodies of knowledge change so rapidly that even a 3-year cycle wouldn't be appropriate. So that was the lightning. This is what we've done. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we've arrived at what we're going to do for SFIA 9. So we have found that SFIA is used in all of the, and probably some others too, industry sectors on the left-hand side. So it isn't just the digital IT service companies or the IT companies of this world. We are finding SFIA is used in all of those sorts of organizations. And there's even an agricultural framework that's been built that is based on SFIA. It seems that SFIA has, through no promotion, become a globally accepted de facto standard for skills and competencies. And pretty much all of the more recent frameworks are either inspired by SFIA or to some degree mapped to it, or picked bits of SFIA to make themselves look a little like SFIA. We're the ones to be compared to. That's good and bad. But we're very open. We're happy to share. We're happy to collaborate, and we are collaborating with some at the moment. There's a data framework that's been built in Australia, and they want to work to make that framework more aligned to SFIA, and we are working with them to do that so that people can either use SFIA with elements of data that are in SFIA, data management that are in SFIA, or they can use the data capability framework and use other parts of SFIA with it if they wish. And we're doing that with a number of organizations at the moment. The significant changes since last release, since SFIA 8 was published, we have a much increased global user base. It is growing at an incredible rate. We are more open than ever to keeping this global community going. We have 2 countries currently that have countrywide licenses. So both Australia and New Zealand, their governments have said skills are important. We believe SFIA is the way to generate momentum in skills development across our digital community, and therefore we will remove any difficulty in terms of using it by way of paying a countrywide license. So today, any Australian entity or New Zealand entity operating in Australia or New Zealand can do so without any further license fees to be paid. It's covered by government. Australia public sector is a big user of SFIA, and they are very open. They share everything they do. It's available online, and you can see things like their career pathfinder tool, and that has opened people's eyes as to what you can do with SFIA. As outside of pure IT, SFIA is widely used because the concepts are well appreciated. What has happened really since SFIA 7 is that the user community has said to the foundation, but we want guidance from you. Prior to SFIA 7, all you could get from the SFIA Foundation was the framework. You could download it, and once downloaded, you need never have anything to do with the SFIA Foundation again. However, what we found is that many SFIA users want to have an ongoing relationship with the SFIA Foundation, want to talk, want to share their experiences, want to talk to other users, and actually the community has come alive. So you'll find on the SFIA website much, much more now than purely the SFIA framework. We have discussions around particular specialisms. Needless to say, cyber figures heavily. Integrated with existing HR systems, or integration with existing HR systems. We have found that many, many organizations are looking to build SFIA into their existing HR systems. And that makes a lot of sense, actually. An organization looking to address skills and competencies doesn't want to do something else. It wants to do what it always does using its existing processes, and SFIA works very well with that. SFIA is just the language of skills and competencies. And what we found is the more we do, the more the community wants. So the more we do, so the more the community wants. And I've literally just got 2 more slides, but I'll take some time on these. So our movement from 7 through 8 to 9 has been one of much more engagement with the community. It's true to say probably that for SFIA, before SFIA 7 and during SFIA 7, the mindset was raise a change request. And you can still do that. But what we did when with SFIA 7 is we focused on the fact that there probably would be a SFIA 8, and there probably would have been a SFIA 9 and 10. So therefore, we did a lot to build the infrastructure to enable us to update the framework. One of the reasons why almost no other framework updates every 3 years is because it's too expensive to do. It's an enormous task. So we have built the capability to update the framework. And we did that really during SFIA 7 update. We linked to bodies of knowledge there, first of all, when we upped the translations to 10 languages, and we began to provide guidance material, and the first SFIA views were published. Last release, SFIA 8, we adopted themes for changes. So we looked at, if I can remember, certainly cyber, we looked at data, we looked at user experience. And that just meant that people didn't need to raise a change request. They could talk about what was important to them under the basis of a theme. The big thing that resulted in every single skill in SFIA changing in SFIA 8 was that we did a readability rewrite. Many of the skills, the content didn't actually change as such, but we did some little things like no sentences would be longer than 25 words, which was a shame because some of the 70, 80 word sentences were ones that I crafted. But apparently that made it very, very difficult to understand and almost impossible to translate. So we focused very much on how people can use SFIA. We added guidelines to each of the skills. We added a short description of what the skill was before the levels, and we produced this behavioral factors glossary. The outcome of that was that SFIA 7 was liked, and we weren't too sure whether we could still ride on that wave. SFIA 8 has been hugely well liked, and most of that has been around the readability. We now link to 57 bodies of knowledge. We translate into 13 languages. There are 3 more that are requested, and we will work through those. We have a translation manager who looks after that, and most of the translations are done by volunteers. We have separated the document that explains how SFIA works from the reference manual. The advantage of that is we can update how SFIA works documentation outside of the 3-year cycle. It's not going to change the content of the framework, we can change that. And we've done a lot of improvements to our website. Our website was considered to be something like the British Lending Library or Reference Library, British Library, where all the books had been turfed out on the floor. We've tried to organize it a bit better. We are continuing to do that under the guise of making SFIA easier to consume. So we've updated the views. We have some illustrative role profiles. We have a number of things that we're doing as well outside of the framework. We're piloting assessment, skills assessment, and digital badges. And now on to SFIA 9. So what is going to go into SFIA 9? As of today, we don't know. We will only know what goes into SFIA 9 at the last minute. We will again address themes. So we are looking at cyber yet again. We have been asked to look explicitly as procurement and see whether we can enhance the procurement skills in SFIA, effectively building a procurement framework for those people that want to use SFIA in that way. We've been asked to look at bid and proposal management. We've been asked to explicitly address cloud in some way. We've been asked to look at digital health, and we've been asked to look at AI. So we are looking at all of those things. And in addition to those, we are handling just the basic change requests. And change requests can be, I think this skill should have a different level. I think these words are wrong. You want to enhance this skill in this way. But it can be, there's a new area to be defined. The readability enhancements for SFIA 8 with regards to the skills were so well liked, we've been asked to do exactly the same for the levels of responsibility definitions, the generic attributes, and the behavioral factors. And it's a little bit more complicated for those, mainly because our website wasn't geared up to being able to do that. That's been changed. So now we are in a position to address those issues. And I personally think that will have the same impact as the update of the skills. Effectively, what it means is the behavioral factors glossary will disappear because it will all now be explicit within the level of responsibilities and the generic attribute descriptions. Overseeing all of that, or overriding all of that, we are driven by this making SFIA easier to consume mantra. And what that means is that we will be refreshing and adding new guidelines. We will add some more illustrative role profiles, more details on career paths and views. We will have some additional website improvements. Our website originally was effectively an electronic version of the framework manual. There is now so much more on it. And what we need to do is make that more engaging. It's incredibly content rich. It's incredibly valuable resource information, but it's not as easy to consume as it could be. We have some activities going on outside of the pure framework, outside of how the framework is used. One of which is framework interoperability. So how do different frameworks work together? It would be naive to think that an organization can manage with just one framework. Although for many organizations, SFIA is sufficient. But for some organizations, they have other frameworks they want to use. So we're looking at how those frameworks work together. Frameworks can coexist, we can cooperate, and we absolutely do collaborate. So there's no reason why we can't do it. But we've not explained that to people. We've not said how these things operate. I'll give you a couple of examples of this. There are some other frameworks that exist around the world. Every framework has levels, and they're all given numbers. So it's not as simple as 1 equals 1, 7 equals 5. One has to look within the framework. Well, we have some names as well: follow, assist. We know of some frameworks that are using those same names for their levels, and they look like SFIA, but the underlying description of the levels isn't anything like SFIA. We have organizations that are building frameworks where the idea is that, at the lowest level, you're aware of something. Well, SFIA is all about doing. So aware and understand is, if you like, below even SFIA level 1. Well, what does that mean? How can people use these things together? So we're trying to work that through, which is beyond, if you like, the framework itself. And so really, the bit about how you can get involved, I will share a different screen in a minute, but I'll go through this and then come back to the links. So the number of things. We build the SFIA framework in the open, so you can see SFIA 9 as it is being built. If you look at SFIA 9 today, it is absolutely 100% the same as SFIA 8. So you will see the document, if you like, being edited until the point at which we freeze it for a beta release, and then about a month or 6 weeks later, we then release fully. But you'll be able to see it all the way through under the roadmap that's within the website. We produce a monthly newsletter where we update with activities that are going on, including news about SFIA 9 in this case. So it's all sorts of things. So, for example, the new look cybersecurity view of SFIA will be announced at the end of November this month, a couple of days' time, where we have, for example, the nice work roles, the NIST scheme from the US, using their the NICE program for cybersecurity roles. We have leveled those using SFIA and SFIA skills, and we've published that. And we've got a new version of that. So that's the sort of thing we put out in the newsletters. We have been working on an awareness quiz just to help people find out a little about SFIA. We'll be talking about that, all being well, in the newsletter, if we can get that released before the newsletter's due. You can raise a change request using the website. You have to register first, but you can raise a change request. You can see any of the change requests, even if you don't register. But to raise one, you have to register. I would strongly encourage you, if you do that, to say not only what you would like to see change, but also propose what that change is. Raising a change request that just says, something isn't good enough or this needs to change is not very helpful to us. We are experts in building and maintaining a framework. We're not an expert in every single skill within SFIA. We want people who are experts in those skills to help us draft and review changes. You can choose to work on a theme that interests you. When we looked at when we looked at cyber for SFIA 7, we had someone who was very interested in just looking at the whole of the SFIA framework from the perspective of cybersecurity. And he did a fantastic job of identifying what needed to be brought out explicitly, what was there, what wasn't there. You can share your experiences, which help. They help in a number of ways. They inform the changes that we make. So they can be changes to the framework itself, the content of the framework. They can be changes to the foundation offerings, the guidance we provide, or they can be changes to the way the SFIA Foundation operates, the whole ecosystem. We find it really useful to talk to people about what they're doing with SFIA because it informs changes. And if you don't fancy, we're finding a lot of people don't like to raise change requests. If they talk to us, we can raise the changes on their behalf. You can share your experiences with other SFIA users. That generates a pool of interest in something, which ends up resolving some issues, and therefore that gets fed back into the framework or the guidance for using the framework. We can provide webinars. We do provide webinars. If people want to share their experiences of using SFIA, we're happy to provide the vehicle for that. What we do find is that SFIA is now a global community, and I'll give you an example of that. A lady from a company called Rizial gave a webinar, and it was very interesting because it wasn't so much about the professional skills, it was about the way they use the levels of responsibility and the generic attributes in their company. And they talked about how it's used by every single person in that company. It's not just the IT people. And they talked about, you know, how they record what they do in their journal, and how that's used to keep a track of people's skills and how they develop. And after the event, a couple of people just said, "Oh, can we talk a bit more about the journal?" And they had a private conversation, and then it was a question of, "Oh, we could do with that." And the person turned around and said, "Well, you can have it. You know, we'll just take our logo off. You can have it." So there is a share. There's a willingness to share, which is really what the community is all about. And our main focus now going forward is, you know, it was commented, the update of SFIA is business as usual. We know how to do that. What we're really focusing on now is how we can make sure that SFIA is easier to consume. So that's the essence of where we are. In reality, we are working on SFIA 9 at present. We will have a beta for SFIA 9 somewhere around the middle of next year, with the expectation that it will be firmed up for release late 24. So that's towards the end of next year. If we release in September, that is exactly 3 years. I think 3 years plus or minus a month is not a bad thing to aim for. Now I'm going to just briefly show you the elements on the SFIA website. So if I can sort of unshare this, if I can work out exactly how to do that. It's on the other monitor, sorry. Stop the sharing for a moment. And now I will share this, which is, so this is the new look SFIA website. It's still very text heavy. We're not going in for lots and lots of pictures that have little meaning, but we are looking to develop some more useful visuals. We have monitored what is looked at most on this new website. And certainly the most busy area, the most the click dense area is on getting hold of the SFIA framework. The second area is largely the SFIA views, and of those cybersecurity views, this one here actually forms probably the most popular area of the views to look at. Most people are using SFIA to download the framework. We are working on an API. Everything else is fairly evenly spread, but by far the busiest pages are actual skills pages. People are looking at the content of the SFIA framework. I talked about news. So you can get the newsletters. The November one will go out shortly. This is also a good way of keeping up with what's in SFIA 9, but it's other things as well. The roadmap is where everything about what we're doing in the future exists. So just to illustrate what SFIA looks like at the moment, I'll pick any one of the skills, it doesn't matter, acceptance testing. You will notice that if you looked closely at this and SFIA 8, there is no difference. As this is edited and changed, you will be able to see all of the changes and what it now looks like. And we will be populating the right-hand side here with other useful links. So we've currently got links to bodies of knowledge. We've got links to sample skills. We've got links to related skills as well. So, you know, if you're interested in acceptance testing, you might also be interested in testing or user experience evaluation. So that's where you will see SFIA being built, and it's everything. You will see the levels of responsibility being built in the same way. Now look at change requests. So you can see, I'm not logged in at the moment, you can see the content of any of the change requests that are raised. And we currently have 57 pending, all sorts of different things there. I believe if you are not signed in, you can still see the details. Yes, you can still see the details of the change requests if you are not registered. If you want to add a comment, and we would encourage you to do so, you need to register to be able to do that. If you want to raise a change request by going back to the original page, you need to, wherever it is, you need to register to make sure you are registered, and then you can actually raise a change request, and you are then required to put in some content for what you want. And you're also asked broadly where the change applies. Is it one skill? Is it in general? Is it something to do with the levels of responsibility? Or is it outside of the framework? We do have, all of these are discussed at the Design Authority meeting. And yes, we generally accept, well, actually, we accept, decline, or defer. There are some that the change doesn't make sense, or the change is from someone who is less familiar with SFIA and it's addressed in a different way, and we have to address that. It might result in us providing better guidance, but it doesn't necessarily mean a change to a particular skill. And as you can see their progress. Deferral usually results in something, a potential large change coming in too close to the beta release. So if you want us to address a completely new area in SFIA, it's best to raise that early rather than in June next year, because the chances are we won't be able to address it in the remaining time. So that's really just about everything I wanted to say, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Ian. And there are some questions I've got that have come in, and I think they split into two groups. So I'll do the more technical ones first. So
leave the technical ones. Leave the technical ones. Let's do the general wishy-washy ones, because I'm on my own here.
So in terms of contributing, so if we've got ideas and things like, I know something I've been taking an interest in is what's happening with quantum computing. This is the place to go to log that if we want to have it considered.
Yes, that's correct. This is where you would raise a formal change request, and it will get logged and considered. The other alternative is you can talk to us. You can either email me direct, in which case I might pass you on to someone who can deal with it, or you can email our updates manager, which is updates@sfia-online.org, with any suggestion about SFIA, and that will almost certainly result in a discussion. Us following up and having a discussion with you, but that is the alternative route.
And actually, comments just come in. You mentioned volunteering. How can we do that?
Again, either contact me directly or the updates manager and let us know what you're interested in doing. It helps if you have a particular objective for your volunteering, because then we can actually say, yeah, that is something that needs to be done. You can run with that. There's all sorts of things that we do want to be done, and we won't know until people do offer either a little bit of their time, or they volunteer or whatever. This is something I'm interested in, I'd like to get involved in, or this is something I think you might be able to make use of, in which case we are very, very keen to have any help we can.
I've got to say, from a personal perspective, I know I've put my hand up a few times, and yeah, there are skills in there that I've written and contributed to. Yeah, it just takes putting your hand up and making contact, isn't it? And
yeah,
you grab it. Question coming: how many people work or input into the SFIA framework?
I've got absolutely no idea the full numbers. I do remember I can't remember what the numbers are for SFIA 8, funnily enough, but for SFIA 7, I do remember that there was input from 115 countries. That might have been one person traveling around 115 countries. It might have been just one person from one country, but more often than not, it's groups of people. Australia and New Zealand independently have run SFIA 9 workshops where they have got people together from the user base within their country and said, what do you want to see in SFIA? Across the board, and then they sort of prioritize and they say, well, this is something to do with guidance, this is to do with the foundation, this is to do with the framework. We collate all of that. It falls into the accept, decline, defer type mindset, in the sense that some things, a lot of these people are new to SFIA, so they may not know where something is, in which case it might be more a question of, we need to be able to tell people about this. But in other instances, it is, we need some new skills. And in fact, for SFIA 7, I think it was SFIA, it might have been 8. For SFIA 7, I think, the people who do quite complex mathematical modeling of things like weather systems and reservoirs and tides and all of that sort of stuff, nuclear reactions, all those sorts of things, those sorts of people, they said, we love SFIA, but we can't use it because it doesn't have this skill. And they proposed something. We said, write it. They wrote it. We wordsmithed it. It's in there. So it's a question of, if there's an area that's of interest to you, that's the way to get involved. Volunteer for something that you actually want to do.
Great, thank you. Could you say more about the API functionality and what scope of access might be involved?
Right.
I have got a broader question for you in a second after that, but
okay.
Yeah.
We're at the point where we have a draft or pilot API which enables people to get the SFIA framework, only the content of the SFIA framework. We are building it a little bit more to make that to make that more reliable, better to use, easier to use. People who have used it like it, because they can get access directly to the website. What they have all come back with saying, but it would be great if it could do this, if it could do this, and if it could do this, which is nice to receive. But now we've suddenly got to try and address some of those things, or at least plan out how we gradually address those sorts of things. We fortunately have a couple of volunteers south of the equator that are really keen to help us. I haven't got a clue what they're talking about, but they seem to know, and will probably be engaging, making sure that we work with them to enhance the API we've got. We want it to be available before SFIA 9 because there are people wanting it for SFIA 8. I'm no API expert, so when someone tells me we need it to do this, if they can tell me how it does it and volunteer to help that aspect, then that's how it gets done.
Thank you. I know we're running slightly over time, but we did have the AGM at the beginning. But there's one group of questions that I've just got to put together. Why is SFIA not recognised as much in the UK as in other countries? Is there a mapping between SFIA and the GDS roles? Where does DDS DDAT fit in? Why does the UK government?
I think it's time to go home at this point, isn't it?
Repeatedly insist on reinventing skills frameworks when we've got SFIA. So, yeah.
Okay.
Why isn't it so popular in the UK when it's obviously very popular in Australia, New Zealand, and other parts of the world?
That's a question I can answer honestly, and I'd love to, but over a beer or coffee when things aren't recorded. I'll tell you why, actually. I will be slightly cynical. There is no reason to have a framework except to solve a problem. the problem to solve is quite tricky. And so a lot of people who are charged with solving the problem think, my God, this problem is tricky. I know what we'll do. We'll build a framework, because we don't have to solve the problem. We just have to play with the framework for a few years. And if that could be funded, that's a great thing to do. Now let's try and turn off the cynic hat for a moment, or cynic tap for a moment. I just think if you're asked to solve a problem and someone says, oh, we need a framework, I don't think it's just a British thing, but it is certainly true that the Brits choose to go and build something new. They will not look at what's already out there. Yeah, I can be as cynical as you want me to be. It's disappointing because it's far, far easier to modify something that is a good 80% plus solution than it is to come and build a completely new 100% one, because all of the frameworks that have been built since SFIA and the frameworks that have been built prior to SFIA, I can look at them. Anyone who really looks at this sort of thing can look at them and see what the problems are. And we know that people building new frameworks are going to make the same sort of, create the same issues as other frameworks, which is why collaboration and how many frameworks do we need? I'm not looking to take over the world, but SFIA is there. SFIA is there, and it has been there, and it has a track record. None of the newer frameworks come along do things as well as SFIA. Are they prettier in some ways? Well, some of them are focused on how it looks, and there's often a lot of money behind it to promote it, but they don't actually generate changed practice. People who pick SFIA up have changed the practice, and so it's not decoration.
I think one of the biggest things is what you've got on screen, which is just the open contribution, the ability to see the framework developing. I don't know of any other framework you can see it that clearly.
No, there's two other things I would say. I'm conscious of time because I could go on for this for a couple of hours, this bit. When people build new frameworks, they usually get government funding to build a framework. And they go into that with absolutely no idea, no thought, no planning, or deliberately not addressing the issues of, we might have to fund an update to this. We might have to support it in some way. We might have to promote it in some way. So people think, oh, we can build a framework. Great, job done. Well, no, it isn't. That's the start. You then have to update it. There are other frameworks out there that don't update any more regularly, if you're lucky, than 6-7 years. Well, any framework in the skills area, in any fast-moving area, any longer than 3 years is going to be dramatically out of date. And the second thing I would say is, I think the guy from Australia summed it up really well when asked exactly that question. Why have you got a countrywide license for SFIA? And he said, we're a G20 country. We've got the money. We've got the capability. We could build our own. But if we can have one at a fraction of the cost and we can have it today, and we can influence its future design and changes, then why would we build our own? His view was it will take us 7 years to do what? Not to build a framework. It will take us 7 years to get the level of usage of a new framework that SFIA already has. Why would we, when we can have it for such a small cost? If I say any more, I'll probably regret it.
That's why I saved it to the end, Ian. I thought.
Well, that's also, I'm not surprised you asked the question. If it hadn't been asked by someone, I'm sure you would have dragged that one up just to put me on the spot.
Yeah. With that, I'd like to say thank you very much, Ian. It's always a pleasure having you come to the group. We've always got people in the learning development specialist groups want to contribute to SFIA. So it's great to see it continuing to evolve. And yes, thank you for your time this evening. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Let's have last quick question. Is human resources recruitment and retention effectiveness driving the interest in adopting SFIA?
Right.
Yes, it's one of.
Yes, but let me just add one sentence because I could go on with on about this. I think when SFIA was first produced, the real mindset behind it was, wouldn't it be handy if our IT managers was able to more effectively manage the skills of the people they've got? And then they can talk about it and share all that. I would say that the interest in SFIA over the last few years has the area of interest in SFIA has come from HR. Yeah. HR have finally realized, no, not finally realized, that's unfair, sorry. HR have finally found SFIA. SFIA doesn't do what HR does. What SFIA does is it enables HR to be more effective at what they do with regards to skills in the digital domain. And that is why the HR people have said, thank goodness. They still do recruitment. They now just use SFIA. They still do appraisals. They just use SFIA. I will now shut up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to put, Michelle posted the email earlier.
Perfect, thank you.
But we've got updates at sophiaonline.org if you want to get involved in the process. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Ian. It's been really good having you along tonight. Hope to see everyone in the following sessions. We've got January with our How to Write a Book, which is another interesting topic we've been trying to get for a long time. And we will get you back in later on in the process with SFIA and see how things are going.